Welcome back to Bammerhab, Season 4, Episode 2. Bammerhab is a podcast about one writer's attempt to dig deeper into God's Word by exploring the Greek and Hebrew words inside it. I'm SDG Morgan, and I'll be your tour guide around this dig. Today's episode is another interview with missionary and storyteller Philip Ulrich. Philip is the author of the Growly books, and he fell into writing after being a musician, a filmmaker, and a missionary in Eastern Europe. He jokes that by being Australian, he probably has natural-born abilities to hunt and wrestle dangerous wild animals. Phil is currently at work on a new book, plot kept under wraps, as well as concluding the 7-book arc of his Adventures of Growly series. Quick note, my two boys love the Growly series of books, and it's been a great read aloud for all of us. It's a great bridge between early reader books and later middle grade books. As I always do in interviews, I asked Philip Ulrich to pick the verse and the word that will be the launching off point of our conversation. He picked 2 Corinthians 5:20, which reads, "We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God." The word for ambassador in Greek is presbyumen. And presbyumen here is translated as ambassador because it's literally the Greek word for old men, which also means priest. The English word priest is actually a slurring of the old word presbyter. Quick note, yes, presbyter is where the word Presbyterian comes from because their church government originally stopped with the pastor or the priest and didn't extend up to the bishop level. But in addition to meaning old man and priest, presbyumen also means ambassador in this context. It was a recognized term of employment in the ancient world because the thinking was, if this is your village elder, then this person is so experienced in their culture and their ways that they can represent the entire people as an ambassador to the emperor or to other foreign courts. And there's a really touching inversion implicit in this Greek term. An ambassador, again, is an elder statesman, a revered and powerful great man. But rather than this lofty position granting Paul a dignified distance, he first beseeches, then implores, and the Greek here is a lot more forceful because he begs and he begs and begs for his brothers and sisters in Corinth to listen and repent and understand. An apt comparison in our day might be saying, I am a CEO for Christ, but I'm begging with you, I'm pleading with you, I'm knocking on your door personally just to get your attention, I am desperate to convince you. Well, CEOs just don't do that in the modern world. Neither did ancient ambassadors. But Paul did. And now we are ambassadors for Christ, just as Paul was. And there are lots and lots of ways to be an ambassador for Christ. And that's where my conversation with Phil starts off. All right, well, welcome to Bammerhab, Philip Ulrich, author of the Growly books. And you chose to focus in on 2 Corinthians 5:20. So first, Philip, why did you choose this word, ambassadors for Christ? And what's your favorite thing about it?
Well, first of all, I'll just say thanks for having me on the podcast. This is awesome. I feel really honored. It's fun to do something like this.
I'm really excited to have you on. My boys have loved you for forever. So yeah, this is going to be a great conversation.
Well, good. Yeah, that verse has kind of become a life verse for me. There was a time in my life where I was working in missions, and what I was doing there was I had a band, and we would just tour Eastern Europe, Turkey, kind of all through the Balkan region. A lot of people would come for short-term missions. We just would take whoever would come who could play something. So the name of the band was changing fairly regularly, just for all kinds of random reasons. And my base leader from the missions base where I was working from, he finally said, look, you really need a band name that actually means something. So that was in the back of my mind. And one morning I woke up, it was after we'd come back from a trip. And usually I was just wiped out for a week or so afterwards.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's tough. It was tough going. And I woke up like at 5:20 in the morning, and I looked at the clock, it was 5:20. And just this song just started popping into my head. And so I started writing down the words. And then later on I was thinking, 520 would be a good name for a band because we go to so many countries and you have to translate the name. I said, it's a number. It just goes across any,
Right.
borders. And I said, okay, there must be a verse. Maybe it's a verse. So I went through all the verses. There's some bad 520 verses like Galatians 520. It's all the list of sins. It's like not that one.
Not the vibe you're going for.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was aiming for. But then when I hit Second Corinthians 5:20, it just kind of knocked me out of my chair. It was like, that's it. That's the whole definition of what we've been doing for these last years. That's even before I came to missions, when I first got saved. That's what the Lord, he's over and over. You're going to be my ambassador.
That's awesome.
Uh, this is kind of, I guess, goes along with my story as I didn't make it through high school, not by my choice, and just was working a job and saw that Australia has government television network and film school, that kind of thing. And so tons of people, I mean, thousands of people apply, but somehow I got accepted to that. And so that's even without a high school degree, got into college. But I just see God's hand on that second chance, of being led towards a field that, he had some connection for me in.
Sort of like a creative ambassador in film, and then you were doing music, and now you're doing writing, and you had said graphic design, but you've been in almost every creative field being an ambassador for Jesus. But I was wondering, for some of your personal testimony, you said you came to Christ in high school, or is it college, you said?
I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, went to Christian school. So after college, I was going to get into the television industry, started working there. Around that same time, started a band, and that became more of a full-time thing until it was a full-time thing. And I thought I was a Christian then. We'd get really drunk or something and sit around after a gig and get the Bible out and pull out a few verses, thinking that we were doing something for the kingdom.
Right.
But none of us had any relationship
Mm-hmm.
or submission to the Lord, or he wasn't Lord of our life at all. Just we had that background. We knew the verses to pull out,
Right, yeah.
and we knew the verses to avoid as well. So I ended up through a lot of different circumstances on the streets in Berlin some years later. I was 21, just hopeless, felt like everything had just come crashing in, and was sleeping in a kind of a homeless thing, and they'd kick us out every morning, and I just had to walk the streets all day, and
All right.
I didn't have much with me, but I had a Bible. For some reason, I'd always carried a Bible around, and whenever I'd read it, I'd feel peace, And one time I was just sitting. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was like a voice just said, either you believe all of it or you don't believe any of it. It's just poetry. There's no peace for you in there if it's not all true.
Right.
I just said, okay, God, I'm going to believe. I don't understand all of it, but I'm going to believe all of it. And eventually made it back to Australia. Yeah, from then on, it was just a whole different life.
That's awesome. So how'd you get into missions then? Just once you went back into Australia, or?
I got back to Australia. I was pretty cynical about the church at that point. Everyone's going to get hurt by the church at some point. And as a kid,
Right, yeah.
I dressed wrong. I was rebellious and all that. So I should have been called out. But, I got back to Australia. I'd been having, it took me probably 6 months, 8 months to get back to Australia. And I was working in a nightclub, which was all my friends were still in that scene. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just work there. It's an easy job to get. I usually didn't start till about 10 at night. And one night I was just reading my Bible, and I just felt like the Lord said, you need to go to work early tonight. And this was like probably 5 p.m. I thought, okay. Walked out the door, and this girl came up to me straight and said, you got to come to church. And it was such a shock that someone would just walk up to me and say that I nodded. I said, okay. And so there was a church just down the road, and it was Assemblies of God Church. So I was just like, what in the world is going on here? Wanting to kind of run out, and this guy came up to me. He said, Phil. And it was this other guy from my high school who had just been in my group.
Right, yeah.
I want to say we're bad, but just, not good. And I could just see, looking at his face, he was like a totally different person. And I was just so shocked I stayed. And back when I was kind of in the punk era when I was in the,
What era was this? This was like the 80s
this
or
is mid 80s,
mid
yeah,
80s?
like
Okay.
mid
Yeah.
to late 80s. And we'd go downtown Sydney and there'd be this group of Christians who would stand on the corner, acoustic guitar and sing songs and preach. And we would all just kind of laugh at them and like everyone did, and or you go up and you ask them these questions as if you were really wanting help and then, just be jerks.
Yeah.
But it turned out that this was the same church that did that. It wasn't long till I was one of those people out there in the corner. And I just said,
God
Lord,
has a sense of humor. Yeah.
God, you got such a sense of humor, like, but the funny thing is when I'd been in Germany and the Lord was kind of walking me through, one of the big things he used was that group of people. He brought them into my mind so clearly. And he said, they believe something. They know they sound bad. They know they look silly, but they believe something so much that they're getting out there anyway. And I just said, I want that. I want the Bible to be so real to me that I'm not trying to look cool or,
Right.
it's not that I think that everyone has to do that to have a great relationship with the Lord, but he just really used them as an example to me to say they really believe something, that they're not afraid to look foolish, And so, yeah, that's kind of how after that, I was like, what do I do, Lord? And one thing that happened before this was when I first come back to Australia, I've gone through this process of just getting rid of stuff from my old life. Like a lot of people go through that, I think, when they've lived a pretty rough,
Right.
I just didn't want any connection with that stuff. And so I was getting rid of stuff on my record collection, all these different things, being that extreme Christian that, made all my friends mad.
It's definitely a stage you have to go through. It's not always the final stage, but you need to be
It's a
willing to
part of
do it.
something, of breaking that. And I just felt lighter. I felt
Right.
like a lightness come over me as I
Right.
went through that process.
Sort of doing the thing in Ephesians where,
Yeah.
all the magicians burned their books of magic, so they were like making
Yeah.
a clean break.
Yeah.
Quick note, I meant the magicians in Ephesus who burned their books of magic, but that's in the book of Acts 19:19. My mistake. That spoke to me at one point too. I had to do a similar thing. I think every Christian needs to do that, and then you always kind of overdo it, and then you take it back. But I think God
You
wants to
come back.
see,
Yeah. Yeah. That's something the Lord is.
right, God wants to see you ready and able and willing.
Yeah. I was going through this process and I felt such a lightness. I was like, Lord, is there anything else here that I can get rid of? And I just felt like he said, your resume. And I was like, it kind of shocked me.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know about that. Is that really you, God? I said, no, that wasn't God. And I went out and sat in the living room. I just didn't have a peace. I tried to go to sleep, couldn't sleep, got up and I was like, Lord, I really feel like that you said that. But it doesn't make sense to me. Then I just felt like I said, Lord, if this isn't you and I'm wrong, please, I'm doing this as best I can, following you,
Right.
but bring it back if I'm wrong,
Right.
So all my certificates and that was kind of how I ended up in missions, I guess, was I just said, I never felt like a missionary, but it was like, Lord, where do you want me to go next? What do you want me to do? Sometimes it was a daily basis
Hmm.
of just, I want you to talk to that person, or I want you to just read my word today,
Right.
or I want you to go, you get a job here, do this. It's been different things. I felt like the Lord was saying go on missions. My parents had taken me on a mission trip as a kid
Hmm.
when I was getting in a lot of trouble, trying to get me in a good atmosphere. And
Right.
at that time, it really affected me.
Where'd you guys go?
We went to the Solomon Islands.
Okay.
As we were coming back, there was a cyclone coming in. We were in this small plane. It was like the pilot was sweating. But I just felt this huge peace over me. I just thought, one day I might be a missionary. But then when I go back to Australia after that trip, I just said, but first I want to have some fun, because to me it was like you missionaries when you settle down and
Right. Okay.
be serious with life,
Hmm.
but I want to have some fun first. And I went really away from the Lord in that
Right.
time. So I read this book about missions in Amsterdam back in the 70s with the hippies and
Right. Yeah.
like 60s and 70s. And I just thought, I want to go to Amsterdam. Like, where could I think of that's a city and that's kind of rough?
Right. Definitely needs Jesus.
Yeah. I said, and I read that book and I was like, yeah, that's the place. And so got a one-way ticket to Amsterdam and did a school there. And while I was doing the school, someone said, would you consider coming and helping start a missions base in Budapest in Hungary? And
So you started in Hungary. You said Eastern Europe, so it was Hungary first, and then
yeah, Hungary was where I kind of based. And that was my home base the whole time I was in missions.
do you speak any Hungarian or?
I did then a little bit. I mean, it's
Oh,
the
okay.
Even Hungarians would say it's the heavenly language because it's going to take eternity to learn it.
I like that.
Because it's the only language in Europe, but the language itself is comes from above Mongolia.
Yeah, it's a language isolate. So it's the Huns came through. That's why it's Hungary, right? Yeah, so the
Yeah,
Magyar,
so it's not connected to it
right.
to Latin in
It's
any
not
way,
Indo-European at all.
and you have to say it exactly the right way, like you would with Chinese. The intonation is
So
important.
it's tonal. I didn't know it's
Yeah, I
tonal.
mean, well, I think because there's no other countries around that
Right,
do variations of it,
right,
people, if you don't say it exactly, that you can have trouble understanding what you're saying.
right. Because
So
yeah, it's I know in Chinese it's tonal, and the same letters can be 10 different words. Yeah,
exactly.
that's crazy. I didn't know Hungarian did that.
Yeah, well, it's probably not as tonal as Chinese, but
Right, but it
it
still
is
has
that
that,
thing
yeah,
of
that remnant. Quick note, Hungarian is a member of the Uralic language family assigned to a branch originating in Western Siberia.
but if you're always in a city when you're always around people from all different kinds of
You get used to hearing
cultures,
how
you
it,
learn to
right.
listen for differences in
Well, I mean,
pronunciation.
I
So,
speak English and I was in a British school and they couldn't understand me
oh man, I
because
had
I was American.
my hardest time anywhere in Europe that I traveled would have been when I lived in London for six
Really?
months.
Wow.
I was working with a Scottish guy and a Cockney guy,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and we would laugh so hard, we don't know what each other's saying. It's like
Yeah, that's right.
supposed to be speaking English, but
Yeah, three people
yeah,
speaking English who can't understand a word that each other's saying.
but yeah,
That's great. So you traveled from Hungary as your home base all around Eastern Europe, even into Turkey, you said.
yeah. We when I went to my mission school in Amsterdam, part of the school is you do 3 months of study, discipleship, just growing in the Lord, and then you'll do 3 months of practical outreach somewhere.
Right.
So that when they heard that I had a background playing in bands and doing different things, they said, "Well, would you consider leading a band as part of the outreach?" And I said, "I don't feel comfortable about that. Like that's my old life. That's not me anymore.
Right.
They said, well, sometimes the Lord can take something that you were using for the wrong reasons and turn it for a good reason. And
Yeah, I've definitely seen that in a lot of stories myself and like other missionaries. The thing that you gave up, you were supposed to give it up, but then it comes back to you differently. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
wow, I thought I'd
exactly.
given this up. I was
Yeah.
all ready to give this up entirely. And boom, it's
Yeah. They,
back.
they said, you write songs. Why don't you write songs about your experience with the Lord? And so I said, okay. So in the time at that school, I just wrote a bunch of songs, just like we were a rock band, pretty scrappy, thrashy, thing. But we went on this outreach, and there was a real window opportunity in that area. And at time, communism had
I was gonna
just
say, if it's the late 80s, was that right after like the Berlin Wall?
this was early
Early,
90s.
oh,
This was
wow.
92.
So you
So
were perfectly placed. That was a major
yeah,
window.
it was a great time. So we did that, and I met a friend there, and we just recorded a bunch of drum tracks and things on a boombox, and we'd go into schools and play songs. And there was just a real openness. We'd go to the train stations and set up, do stuff, and I wouldn't say preach, but we'd share our testimonies, which
Well, you were ambassadors. You were being
yeah,
ambassadors, right?
yeah. And
Ambassadors for Christ.
then it became, kept getting more and more invitations to go different places. So we would go to a city, play in their clubs, wherever we could. And then we just would say, we're going to be in the park every evening. We're going to come and hang out. We would talk about the Lord, we'd go through the Bible a little bit.
So
And
were you then like working with trying to set up churches, like church planning, and you were like the evangelism team to
yeah,
go
yeah,
and like,
we'd always work with someone who was established in that city
right,
as best we could. I mean, sometimes you
right.
go somewhere where there just wasn't anyone.
Yeah, post-communist, there may not be a church.
Yeah, the great thing was all the radio stations and things would hear, oh, there's a foreign band coming through.
Oh, cool. So you were a celebrity.
Yeah, we'd be on TV and the radio, and then they said, well, what do you sing about? And we said, we sing about Jesus, about our relationship with Jesus. And they're like, what? That was just like that's crazy. That wow. And I said, well, it's no different than any band. You know, you sing about what's important to you.
Right.
That's what's important to us. And so it was a season where there was just a real openness
So how long were you doing that? You said like early 90s till,
till around 2000, I
and
guess.
you said you met your wife in there?
Yes, like towards the mid to late 90s, Erin came through. She was doing a mission school,
Right.
and she, as part of her school, she came and joined with us. So we worked together about 3 years before we went on our first date. You know, we got married over there, and
Oh, you got married in Eastern Europe.
yeah, we got married at little island in the Danube.
Oh, wow. Did you ever go to Bulgaria?
Yeah, we did get through Bulgaria. Not as much as other countries, but I liked it. It was definitely in a worse place than yeah. I mean they were definitely poorer than the surrounding nations.
I'm curious because like God put Bulgaria on my heart and I didn't even know where it was. So I was
Yeah,
looking for Bulgaria and it's like I started, me being sort of academic. He's like, I've got to research history. We're the Bulgars, we're like Thracians and all this going deep history. But then I started supporting some missionaries over there. But
yeah.
I,
But I had an interesting story from a missionary who I don't know if I spoke to him or just heard him at a conference or but he'd been working in Bulgaria amongst Muslims and he was telling some of the stories, just incredible stories. And this guy had gone to a village, came in there, and the whole village came out. I mean, it's a pretty decent sized village, wanting to be baptized. And he's like, what in the world? Like this is a Muslim village. You can still see the, minarets and everything. And he said, what's going on? And so the imam from the village, he said that his son had died. And, they usually will hold the body before it's buried for a certain amount of time.
right, like a wake sort of thing.
Yeah. And he was heartbroken, and he gone to the beach and he was praying to the different prophets. And of course, Jesus is considered a prophet, just not God.
Right.
And so he had prayed to Jesus, and either he had a vision or that night he had a dream. He said, at a certain time tomorrow, your son will be raised from the dead, and it'll be through the power of Jesus. So he called the whole village together, and they came, and sure enough, the sun sat up. And so it was like, okay, we're Jesus followers.
Wow.
Yeah, but they knew some things about what Jesus followers did, and baptism was one of it. So
Right.
this missionary, he just walked in and
So he
they were
just
like,
showed up and they're like,
show us what to do.
wow,
Yeah. So
that is so cool.
yeah.
Wow.
So
That is
I think
awesome.
it's less, there's definitely the extremists and we count as extremists sometimes, but a
Right.
lot of the young people were just like, well, all we know about Christians is they kill Muslims and they drink blood or something, like, so it's just,
We've heard some vague rumors. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like there's not a real understanding, and it's not
Wow.
at least in Turkey back then. I mean, it's definitely gotten more hardline now,
So this
but
was like early 90s
yeah,
again. So
early
like,
mid
yeah,
90s.
man, there was a window there.
Yeah, it really was. After 9/11, things changed a lot. But um,
Yeah. So where do you see the overlap between your work in missions in Eastern Europe and what you're doing now in writing?
yeah, well, I was reading this verse this morning. I read it in a different translation. I wasn't used to reading it. It's Hebrews 10:36. It just says, "You need the strength of endurance to reveal the poetry of God's will, and then you'll receive the promise in full." So usually it says in the New King James it'll be after you've done the will of God. But when I read that the poetry of God's will, I was like, okay, where'd that come from? And so I looked,
Oh, that's
and
nice. Yeah.
in the Greek, it's kind of like the word hints uses a word that's used in poetry.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of hinting at you're trying to understand the poetry, God's poem.
Wow. Quick note. This is from the Passion Translation, and it's referring to the Greek verb poieo, which means to do or to make, and it is the root word of our word poetry.
When poems are tough,
Yeah.
like the Psalms, they'll start off with ranting or hurt. Why aren't you doing something? And then they'll come to, oh, you are doing something. I think that's the life that we live. And that's for me, it's like, that's what I need to keep doing is pressing in. But what is that poem that you're doing in me? It doesn't make sense sometimes. And sometimes the Lord's leading me to leap, and sometimes it's just me leaping, and then I've got to, oh, okay, that was a mistake, but I've just found that the Lord, He's always got something for you every day. writing a book, it's a big commitment. You got to look for the long haul on that one,
Hmm.
as you understand too.
Yeah.
But there's things where it's just like, okay, what is it today, Lord? That's what I'm trying to train myself.
Right.
I started driving Uber a few years ago, kind of get away from the computer a little bit, and I was looking for some different income as well. And Aaron was like, "You do realize that you'll be around people doing it?" Because I'd been just by myself so long, I wasn't used to being around.
Right. Yeah. So this is a good time. Can you do a quick elevator pitch for Growly, what it is, and how you could describe to someone who's never heard of it, read it, or come across it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Growly books. It's an adventure series written for the reading level would be 8 to 12-year-old, but it really is. We have a lot of our readers do it as read aloud for younger kids, as there's nothing too scary in there. Like there's some adventure elements, but it's all out in the wild adventure. It's the story of a young bear named Growly who lives in a village on the top of a precipice that they haven't been able to, the bears of that village have never been able to get past it. But Growly's grandfather's friend went missing over in a glider years before. And so Growly kind of goes out searching for him to try and bring him back home again. So the series follows that search and that adventure.
And then bumps into his best friend, Chippy.
He meets a lot of friends along the way.
That's right. I'll ask you this from hearing your story, this idea of just going off the precipice on your own to go and follow in someone's footsteps. That seems a lot like you.
Yeah.
You launched off into Eastern Europe, you launched off and you start new things, you go on adventures, and then you meet lots of friends along the way. I see a lot of your story, suddenly hearing your story, it's like, oh, that's where Growly came from. He's like gliders going off the precipice
Yeah.
because that's sounds like you've been in that position several times with God of like, okay, this is a giant cliff looking thing and I don't know where you're taking me,
Yeah.
but I do know how to fly my glider, so I'm just going to see where the winds take
Well,
me.
I mean, for better or worse, that would be a key element of my life. And a lot of times it's been worse. It's not always like, well, look at that leap of faith. Sometimes it's that leap of stupidity. So,
But you trust your instincts a lot, it sounds like.
yeah, definitely that got me into trouble as a teenager. And thankfully, the Lord can redeem
Anything, yeah.
and he can use that. We all have personalities that are different and ways of looking at the world and doing things. And so I think he understands a bit of my personality. I mean, he knows my personality better than I do. There's a place for people who sometimes leap before they look.
Yeah.
uh,
I've heard someone, it was a pastor, say that if you look at all the apostles, whatever they were doing when they met Jesus is what he eventually calls them to do again. Peter's fishing,
yeah,
and he says, go be a fisher of men. John is mending nets, and what John ends up doing is being like, he's mending Christians, he's putting them back together. He's like
yeah,
ministry work for Christians, he's mending the nets. That you can see it all over wherever you were doing, wherever God calls you, is where he wants you to stay and what you are doing. So you seems like, you literally did that with music, where you gave it up to follow Jesus, and then it came back.
yeah, yeah. Everything was falling into place, and then everything fell out of place all at once. And so we ended up moving to South Carolina. Started because of what we've been doing with blogging and getting, with the music and that kind of stuff. People were asking Erin could help. She's just a great technical person as well. So I was getting a lot of work doing blog design, and I had some
Like the admin side of things.
kind of the creating the websites.
So I guess it's a good place to plug her business, Aaron Ulrich Creative.
Erin Art Creative, she is awesome. And not just because she's my wife, but her specialty is once she has the content and the information from you, you can have a full, really good website in a day.
Wow.
A lot of times it'll take people months of back and forth and,
Right, yeah.
it's like, no, we're going to knock this out. It's going to be awesome. So, but yeah, I was doing more of the graphic side of things, and I got more into that, book covers, doing layouts and things for writers. A lot of writers we ended up doing stuff for, and it was kind of the time when ebooks were becoming very popular.
So this is like 2010.
Yeah, 2010. And I did a few covers that the book went really well. And so
Right.
we never really advertised, but it just became something we were doing quite a lot of. But during that time, I went to bed one night and I kind of had this little dream, and in the dream there was this little bear thing.
Hmm.
I guess it looked like a bear the most. Walks out of the forest, and there's this song playing with it at the same time. And he goes into this town, and he's just curious. People are digging in the garden. He
Right.
doesn't know what they're doing, but he wants to try it all. So he's going over and trying to motion that, "Oh, I want to try that digging with that shovel, But the people are thinking, wow, this bear is like so friendly, like so helpful, he
Right.
wants to help me with my work. And so it's this curiosity versus misunderstanding. And
Right.
so the song builds up and up of they just love him, and it's like swinging their mugs and we love you, and carrying him on their shoulders, that became part of the Growly books later on. But
I was gonna say that's book three, right? Isn't it?
it's in the
Where
first book, yeah. In the
it's in the
first,
first book where they in the human
yeah,
town, right?
the human town,
Yeah.
yeah. But I woke up the next morning and I could totally remember that song. It was just like super clear. And I
Was that Adventure My Bear Adventure?
no, it didn't end up in the books at all. If
Oh,
there's a
okay.
movie, it would end up in the movie. But
So that's interesting that it came through music for you because you're still thinking in music.
yeah,
So the writing ideas come through the music. That's really
yeah. Well,
cool.
the song was called "We Love You," and so there is a chapter called "We Love You." Begin. I think there is in Begin.
Hmm.
So I told Erin, I said, I think this is a music video. Watching it, just this growing misunderstanding. And she said, no, I think that's a book. I said, what? She said, yeah, where did the bear come from? And where is he going to?
Well, that's interesting. So that was the root of it right there, that
Yeah,
little.
that was the start of the story. And so,
Well, that's where it
yeah,
started. So I know like Tolkien when he was grading tests and he just flipped over a test and just wrote there was a hobbit in a hobbit hole and he didn't know what
yeah,
it was and
yeah,
everything sort of fleshed out from there. And I think C.S. Lewis had a weird idea of a fawn carrying parcels near a street lamp and then everything fleshed out. But I've talked to a lot of writers where they just get this one strong vision little image like, huh, what is that? And like, where did he come from? And where, like, that's interesting that
yeah.
it's the Growly going into the human town.
It
But
is funny. Yeah,
well, you'd mentioned that how about you write with your wife, but you basically sort of you start the story and she's more the
yeah.
editing
I
and
think
shaping or
what I've come to realize is, I'm definitely a storyteller, but yeah, I wasn't really great on the grammar side of it. And Erin, she worked kind of as a content editor, and we talked through a lot of the plot points and different things, and she kind of helped form Growly's world a little bit, and how the characters interact with each other.
hmm,
Really good kind of a sounding board for me, because I'm kind of. It took me a little while to find what the parameters were. I just don't think Growly would say that, or I just, it was like you just knew what fit in this world and you knew what didn't fit in this world
right.
pretty early on. And I said, I just don't think there's going to be any villains in this story. Can you have an exciting story without any villains? And I just thought, if you want to enjoy heaven, you better get used to
Yeah.
the idea that you can
Right.
find some excitement without there being villains.
Well, I think that's what really connected with my sons is like villains are too scary, but they really want adventure
Mhm.
and they want to know where they're going and they relate to this idea of meeting new kids like Chippy and going out into their own and it just connects with so many of the things that they are doing right now. Plus they love maps and they will study those maps in the front.
Yeah,
Those maps were like his primer maps for Lord of the Rings of like I've caught my youngest just sitting there and staring at the maps and
yeah,
then he jumps forward and he's comparing the maps. So this idea of
I love maps. So yeah,
exploring the world
yeah,
really connects to them and they love that
yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah. And so I think Erin, she's played a huge part in that, in really just helping form how the story came together. But definitely the writing part of it, I was doing. And so the point came where it was just like, okay, Phil, I've got, she's very busy with her work and with helping the girls. We homeschooled and everything. So
Oh, you guys are homeschooling. I didn't know that.
yeah, well, our oldest girl, is last year of college now, and the youngest is doing theatre. So they're both out of school now, but at the time they was the homeschooling. So
Yeah, I was homeschooled and so yeah, you've sold a lot of your books through homeschool conventions. Is that true?
we that's what kind of where we started out. Yeah, we went there. They had a pretty big one in Greenville, so we tried that out, and the story I think has really resonated with homeschoolers. It's been surprising to me
Hmm.
we've done quite a bit of stuff in public schools here in Greenville.
Or do you do like present it? Do you read it to the kids or?
Mostly what I've done is at times got some sponsors to print books, and we'd give each kid a book, go in there and just talk to them about writing. We went to one school, and the person who was over the media department, she said, this book will be the first book and only book that some of these kids will ever have. Now that was really sad. I was like,
Whoa.
man, she said
Yeah.
this was in some of the poorer areas, but she said parents don't read to their kids. Kids aren't going to
Right.
get a book. So I love the homeschool community. A lot of people
Right.
who know the Lord, I love that they've gotten behind Growly. But there's part of me that's like, oh, I think the great thing with kids is, and this is the key to, I think, really successful evangelism, or I don't want to say evangelism, but being an ambassador is, it just flows. There's not a big separation between talking about Jesus is the king and the creator of the
Right.
world and silliness.
Yeah.
It's just like it's all the same conversation, or it all flows together as part of life. It's just naturally part of life. And I think if he's really real and you really believe that, then he's there all the time. He's connecting everything. And I think people aren't used to that. They're used to you trying to put up a front. So I think that it's like the Lord uses the simple things, or
Right.
you realize what really is powerful, and it's the Lord. And your stuff is,
Right.
when you can get out of the way of him a little bit, he can shine through that. So if you're open to it, he'll often get you there. So
Yeah, by one way or
one way or
another.
another, not usually not comfortable way, but like with silliness, or there's something important about that. Yeah, there's something about that that's important that you need to not let go of.
So I was just reading a book by Katie Bowser Hudson, and she was talking about how playfulness is usually seen as frivolity and silly and almost worthless luxury. But she was talking about when
Yeah,
you're truly, actually, playfulness is the opposite of anxiety.
yeah,
When someone is truly at peace, when children are truly at peace, the one thing you can see in children when they're not doing well and they're anxious and something's wrong, they can't
yeah,
play. But when you're fully peaceful, you play, and is actually a much more serious thing than we realize because it's a mark of health. It's like
yeah,
if you're playing, your brain's healthy.
yeah.
Quick note. It was actually a lecture at Square Halo Conference by Katie Bowser Hudson, which will be a book, but is currently in the process of being written. However, you can follow Katie on her Substack to learn more. If you're not playing, it's because you're too tense, you're too pulled in.
Yeah, no, that's with the Growly books. One little surprise we got one time was we heard from a lady in her 70s who had gotten given the books. She was a strong Christian, but was battling cancer, did some different things, and had gone into depression, clinical depression. And someone had given her some Christian spirit building books, like to encourage her, and the Growly books. And she said when she read the Growly books, something just broke off of her. And we always, when we send them out, we would pray, Lord, just bless this family, but she said it was just the strangest thing. It was just like a kid's book, but something just lifted off of her. And I think that's just the Lord using something. But I think it's that aspect you said. There is it tells us not, the Bible tells us not to be anxious, but I think the flip side of that, when you're not anxious, there is just a silly joy that you can feel.
Yeah.
And I think it's a sign of being confident.
Confidence and peace. Yeah. When children are confident at their peace, they're
Yeah.
playful. And listening to my boys play, they just have the silliest,
Yeah,
these
exactly.
silliest games, but they are totally in sync and they're very serious and they're having the
Oh yeah.
best time. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, so I think that's one thing they loved about Growly is they love it for the sense of adventure
Yeah.
because, they're out of board books and they loved reading Henry and Mudge and they loved reading all the chapter books. But now they're sort of like they're not ready for The Hobbit yet. They're not ready for The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
They're not ready for Narnia, but there's no bridge thing.
Yeah.
And they just really want an adventure that's playful, that has stakes, but isn't too scary.
Yeah.
And man, that's just a perfect niche that you fell in right in that window because they love it, because they want to know what Growly's doing. They want to know about Chippy. They're really just from like, I guess, five, six-ish to eight. There's that gap. There's not even really a good name for the genre.
Yeah.
Early grade or
Yeah, the reading level is would be middle grade just because of the words were.
Yeah. Well, like we were talking about with playfulness and like it's the opposite of anxiety. And you're talking a lot about Holy Spirit giving you peace. But when you
Yeah,
have peace, you can be playful and you can be
yeah,
non-anxious. So I've heard
yeah,
a lot of people talk about being a non-anxious presence, but a lot of that is playfulness. And
yeah,
Jesus would even like, he was very serious at times, but he could be pretty playful.
yeah,
And like some of his things are obviously
yeah,
teasing to make a point, but like Sons of Thunder,
yeah,
he likes James and
yeah.
John, but he's clearly making
He's
a
got some
point
good
by,
nicknames for him.
yeah, he's got some good nicknames. Those are playful. It
Yeah,
seems downright Australian, doesn't
it
it?
does.
Australians do love their nicknames.
I think it's definitely become for me a good guideline of walking out my day, and being an ambassador is just, I want to know more and more of what that pleasure feels like, of the Lord's pleasure in different situations, because
Right,
sometimes it's very serious and sometimes you've got to have
right,
some hard conversations, but you still feel the Lord's joy over that what
right,
he wanted to say was being said. Or and then other times you might just sit and laugh with someone and you don't even talk about the Lord at all, but
right.
they say, thank you so much, I just needed to just feel hopeful, joyful a little bit.
Let me switch gears for a second here. You're originally from New South Wales, right?
Yes, born in Victoria but grew up in New South Wales. Yeah,
Because we were talking earlier about Coonabarabran. Am I saying that wrong? Coonabarabran, where uh,
kindergarten. Yeah,
and the Warrumbungles, where I visited real
yeah,
quickly, and you just happened to have like family in that area, so
yeah. my
that was
my,
crazy.
my uncle had a farm in Coonabarabran. He didn't farm on it at all, but he was a mechanical engineer. He had probably a couple of 100 acres there where he just lived in this 150, 200-year-old house surrounded by kangaroos. And so we had a lot of good memories there. It was great. We would this kind of thing where you'd go out in the middle of the night. We'd walk out into the field without no lights at all, anything, and just stand in the middle of this big field, and then you just turn on your flashlights and there'd be eyes kind of all around you of the
Yeah.
kangaroos. It was like kind of freaky, but I
Well,
love
I
kangaroos.
one of my most vivid moments that I remember in Australia was in Warrumbungles. We're driving up to the telescope that's up there.
Yeah,
And we have to, because you go near a telescope, you have to turn your lights off. Otherwise, you'll blind the telescope person. So you have to drive near the last mile, drive blind.
yeah,
Not blind, but no headlights.
yeah,
And so all of a sudden we heard this giant bump, and it's like, well, we didn't run into anything. Something ran into us, and I
yeah.
turned over there. Two like kangaroos had run into the
Oh
thing, shook
yeah,
their heads, and they're like, "What is this?" And then just hopped
yeah.
off.
That shouldn't be
So
there.
we were run over by a kangaroo. We did not run over a
Yeah,
kangaroo. We were run over by a kangaroo.
yeah. Now you have to be careful of that. They can take out your
Yeah,
car
they're
for sure.
big.
Yeah,
They're big old things. They're like deer.
absolutely.
They really,
Yeah,
having been in the US and been in Australia, is like they remind me most of deer, like if
yeah,
hopping deer.
yeah. Definitely.
This is awesome. I really have enjoyed the conversation. I'm going to end with four quick questions.
Yes.
What's your favorite book?
Oh, and there's a hard one. I hated reading when I was a kid, and by the time I got to high school, because I got forced to read a lot. I lived in the country when I was little, didn't read very much. Moved to a city school, had to catch up 2 or 3 years of reading. So I was just reading and reading and reading until by the time I got to high school, I just couldn't stand it. And my English teacher realized I had a problem, and so he said, yeah, I'm just going to give you this book for fun. There's no questions, there's no tests, but just try and read it just for fun. And it was The Hobbit. So I took that home and I read through again and again and again, and it ignited something in me that, after that point, I read whatever I could get my hands on. It could be an instruction manual or, I like all kinds of books was used, my English teacher thankfully got me into it.
Yeah. And what's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie. A lot of the movies that I loved, I wouldn't recommend to anyone anymore. So that's really
That was part
changed.
of that past life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I keep thinking with my kids, oh, you should watch. No, it's not. Oh, yeah, well, no, no, no,
No.
no, no, no.
Uh,
Yeah, it's funny. The Lord will sometimes just use this really offbeat, weird movie to speak to me powerfully. But again, I can't recommend it to anyone because he just
because
used it for me,
right.
but it wouldn't do good for anyone else. So
What's your favorite type of tree?
Favorite type of tree? Probably a willow or an oak.
Okay.
I like the oaks, just big, impressive tree. I like the willows, just they're just so peaceful to me.
Hmm.
If I can sit down by a river and just see the wind, especially the wind's blowing a little bit, I just love it. That's really nice.
That's awesome.
So
And your favorite landscape or place to be, like it could be a city or somewhere you'd really love to visit.
I'd say my favorite place somewhere. Erin and I, for our honeymoon, we went to Slovenia, which I would recommend to anyone going to Europe. I don't know if you heard of Lake Bled. You
Mm-mm.
could look it up. Bled, Bled. It's this lake. It's in a crater, it's got kind of castles and fortresses along the top of the crater, and then it's got a road that goes around the inside of the crater with like this like little bed and breakfast and things like that. And then in the middle of the lake, there's like a little island with a church. I mean, in the background, you've got the Alps. There's huge Alps there. The lake will freeze. You can get like a sleigh ride out to the church, and it's just so beautiful.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. I'll have to look that up. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I really enjoyed the conversation, all the places you've been, and all the ways you've been able to be an ambassador for Christ in different creative endeavors and different locations and all over the world.
Thanks, Sam. I've really enjoyed this. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you again to Philip Ulrich for graciously coming on to the show. Phil sent over one of his old songs from the band 520, and so I will play out the episode with that. It's a song entitled Isaiah 45. And as always, I hope you'll join me on the next episode and beyond. In the meantime, go dig a little bit deeper into the Word, and remember, in Christ, in Him, the Lord has set us free and put our feet into a broad and spacious place. Bammerhab, a huge word just waiting to be explored. So let's go exploring.
I will go out before you and will level the mountains. I will cut through bars of fire and I will break down gates of bronze. Give you treasures from darkness, riches stored in secret places. So you know that I'm the one God who is calling you by name. I am the Lord, there is no other. Apart from me, there is no God. I will strengthen you and bless you, even though you have forgot. So from the place the sun is rising to the place where it is setting, men will know there is no other. Apart from me, no other God, no other God. No other God. Other God. Other God. Hey, you heavens rain down righteousness, cloud shower it down. Let the earth